Hello and welcome to my video. I'm really excited today because I have a very special guest who's very kindly taken me around Bletchley Park, and that is of course Sir John Dermot Turing, who in his own right is incredibly successful and has achieved a great deal. Having studied at both Cambridge and Oxford respectively, he is also trustee for the Turing Trust. Now, he is indeed the nephew of Alan Turing, who was the codebreaker during World War II for the British government. So I'm currently standing in Bletchley Park, the place where The Imitation Game starring Benedict Cumberbatch and Keira Knightley was filmed. Dermot, could you tell us a bit about how and when you found out about the fact that that film was going to be filmed here?
Yeah, well, they were very keen to do the filming at Bletchley Park. It's a bit of a challenge for us here at the park because obviously it's a visitor attraction. People perhaps don't know that they can come and visit Bletchley Park and find out for themselves what actually happened here. But so we had to sort of try and balance up having a Hollywood sort of circus on the one hand and keeping the place open for visitors on the other. So the compromise was that some scenes were filmed actually inside the mansion, but most of the rest of the movie was filmed off-site. But we did manage to have them here for a few days, and it was quite fun with a little bit of stardust with Benedict and Keira swanning around, and visitors no doubt feeling a bit sort of shell shocked to see Hollywood stars here at Bletchley Park. But yeah, so that was good fun, really.
Did they get a chance to actually see them walking around and things like that?
Yes.
And did you yourself actually get a chance to meet either Benedict or Keira?
No, not really. I found myself in a back room with Keira Knightley's mum at one point. I didn't realise that's who she was.
That's good enough. That's good enough.
So that's my only claim to fame, I'm afraid.
So what happened? They just wandered around, shot some scenes, and that was pretty.
Yeah, well, and of course, shooting some scenes, it's a terrible process. You know, to get 30 seconds of movie involves like 2 days of work of shooting retakes, you know, doing it again and again. So yeah, but so the bar scenes, so if you've seen the movie, the bar scenes were shot here at Bletchley Park in the mansion.
Brilliant, excellent. And so what does the future hold for Bletchley Park in terms of, say, the movie industry, or would you be willing to consider opening it up to any other stars or anything like that?
I don't really, no, I think we've got some very exciting plans for Bletchley Park, but they probably aren't directed towards it being a movie industry.
So there's not going to be sort of like a Pinewood Studios remake here at any point?
Don't think so, but I mean, what we are trying to do here is to bring back into visitor use more of the buildings that currently visitors can't go into, and tell a broader story that appeals to a greater range of people, telling different stories about World War II code breaking. And then we've got a very exciting new project which we're hoping to kick off in the not too distant future, which is we've got some derelict World War II buildings, and we want to put in a new Institute of Digital Technology, so effectively make an education establishment out of some of our empty buildings. So that will be working with Milton Keynes College, which is our next door neighbour, to do that. That will be a really good and modern and relevant thing to do to keep us relevant to the 21st century.
Now, Dermot's very kindly shown me around, and it's absolutely fascinating here, and it's definitely worth a visit. Now, how closely do you think the film depicted the story of your uncle, Alan Turing?
Let me say that it's a good movie, and if you haven't seen it, then I encourage you to go get the DVD, and so it's a good movie, and because it's a good movie, that means that it's not going to be terribly accurate as history. If you want a history lesson, you tend not to go to the cinema for that. So while the general themes of the story are absolutely spot on, some of the characters have been sort of perhaps distorted a little bit to sort of fit the Hollywood sort of screenplay. So for example, the character played by Charles Dance is supposed to be the first director of this place, the first director of Bletchley Park, and the character that Charles Dance plays is very sort of hostile, old-fashioned, doesn't like technology, not very good with managing his people, and that couldn't be further from the truth. So Alistair Denniston, who was the first director of Bletchley Park, very keen to embrace modern technology and new ways of doing things. Very supportive of Alan Turing and his work here. So you get completely opposite picture from the movie. That doesn't mean it's not a bad movie. It doesn't mean it's a bad movie, but you have to remember that what you're watching is Hollywood, not a rerun of World War II.
Now, what else? I mean, were there any other things in there, inaccuracies that you felt need to be highlighted? I mean, of course, you never met your uncle. He died very early at the age of 41. Is there anything else you feel that needs to be highlighted in terms of his life?
Again, I wouldn't say that it sort of needs to be highlighted, because when you fictionalise something, then it's bound to be different from how things were in real life. But the impression you can get of Alan Turing from watching the movie is he's a bit of a he takes being a nerd to an extreme, and he's very sort of difficult to get on with, and doesn't understand his work colleagues and so forth. And I don't think that was true, actually. I think he there's no doubt about it that he was a sort of a strange character, but it wasn't true that he couldn't form relationships with his work colleagues, or they didn't understand what he was talking about, or that he wouldn't understand it if he was being invited to lunch. So he formed some good friendships which lasted all of his life here, and I think perhaps the sort of geekiness is perhaps a bit overstated.
Yeah. And Alan was the younger brother of your father, is that right?
That's right, yeah.
And what was their relationship like?
Well, they were very different people, so really all they had in common was their sort of childhood experience, and they were 4 years apart as well, which means that experience was slightly different for the two of them. So they tended not to mix very much. So my father was a lawyer, Alan was a mathematician, he's a professor, and so they moved in completely different circles. Their friends were different, they were interested in different things, and so they tended only to come across each other at sort of family occasions, Christmas and that kind of thing. So no, I mean that doesn't mean that they were hostile to each other, but they were very. I mean, if you've got brothers and sisters, you kind of know what it's like. I mean, if you can sometimes feel that it's very strange how we wouldn't actually know each other if we weren't actually related.
Yeah.
So I think it was kind of that kind of relationship.
Now, you went to the same school as your uncle, didn't you?
I did.
That's Sherborne School, is that right?
That's right, yes.
And did that feel quite bizarre going around? And I'm assuming your uncle had such a recognition or.
No, because he's a household name now. But when I was a kid, when I was at school, nobody heard of him. So no,
His picture's not up anywhere or anything like that.
Wasn't any more bizarre than if you'd gone to the school that your uncle had been to. So no, so it wasn't. It was perfectly. It was perfectly sort of regular, and I think it might be different now because until 15 years ago, nobody heard about Turing. So nowadays he's a very well-known name, but and so I guess it might be a bit different. But yeah.
Now, your uncle did great work during World War II in terms of code breaking and lots of other things that potentially I don't, and even you might not know about. But in addition to that, lots of things do, plague sort of his death and things like that. I mean, some say it was accidental and some say it was suicide. I mean, how would you like to leave the story of Alan Turing?
Well, I think part of the reason for his fame, if you like, is not just because of what he achieved. There's lots of people who achieved many amazing things here at Bletchley Park. He's just one out of at least a dozen people who made very, very important breakthroughs. But why is Alan Turing the only one that people have heard of? And I think the reason is to do with his personal life story, and people have got this sense that because he was prosecuted for gross indecency and forced to have these sort of fake female hormones, and because he committed suicide, and I think that sort of puts, if you like, a Shakespearean packaging around his story, and that makes him a very interesting character to people. So, to my mind, I think while I'm not in a position to complain about that, I certainly wouldn't. But what it does do is it perhaps shines the spotlight too firmly on Alan Turing as being like as if he was the only person who was solely responsible for the achievements of Bletchley Park. That couldn't be further from the truth. So kind of part of my mission is actually to remind people that there were other people here who did brilliant things.
Yeah.
And just because they didn't have these sort of amazing personal life stories, it doesn't mean that their achievements are any less important.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty amazing, to be honest with you, that you've got almost that mission and that agenda kind of clarified.
Let me just give you an example. I mean, here at Bletchley Park, the first electronic computing machine was invented, not by Alan Turing, but you know, so that was one of the most extraordinary things to come out of Bletchley Park. The Colossus machine that was used to crack Lorentz codes, which is a different machine from the Enigma. And they were using electronic computing machine for the first time in the world to do that. I mean, that's an amazing achievement. And the fact that we're focusing on Alan Turing all the time is distracting us from some of these other quite extraordinary achievements happening here.
And so, how would you like to leave the story then in terms of Bletchley Park and Alan Turing?
I think it's quite important that Bletchley Park, like Alan Turing, doesn't stay something rooted in the past. I think it's really important to keep things relevant and sexy for younger people. And World War II is, you know, interesting, but it's not what Bletchley Park should be about in the future. And I think Alan would not have wanted some historical monument. That's not to say that the achievements here should not be revered and people shouldn't come and find out about them and be fascinated by them. That's all great, but I say that's not enough. I think what we should be doing is looking forward to the next generation, and what Bletchley Park and the story of Alan Turing can tell people is about things like cyber security, being safe online, when is it appropriate for the state to monitor other people's communications. Those are all stories that are relevant to Bletchley Park, and they're still relevant today, and Alan Turing's right there at the heart of what those questions are about. So, you know, we can still think about what lessons we can draw from a place like this and apply in our own lives and our own society today.
Brilliant. So John Dermot Turing, thank you very much. For all of those of you watching, do visit Bletchley Park. I've had a look round, and albeit I haven't seen any code-breaking activities going on personally, there might actually be some that maybe...
it's a secret.
It's a secret.
It's a
Check
secret.
it out. Make sure you do visit. Thank you, and do subscribe. Now, Alan. Sorry, not Alan. I can do this again.
I'm afraid I'm not.
Oh, sorry.
You'll have to cut. You'll have to cut it. That's all right. Carry on.
I'm going to
Cut it.
do this for like the
You can cut
interview.
it.
I'm going to cut it, right? Okay. Right. Let's start again. Should we start again? No, it's all right.
That's all right. That's all right. You just cut it. That's fine.
That's so funny, wasn't it? I might do that a few times.
Don't you dare.
Okay. You're not Alan.